Captain Kim Tae-ho stood at the big window of his spaceship and looked out at the stars. His ship was called the Defiance, and it was the only real warship that Earth had ever built. The ship was huge and powerful, but right now it felt very small. Around Earth, there were now hundreds of alien ships that had appeared from nowhere just a few hours ago. The alien ships were massive and scary-looking. They were dark gray with sharp edges and red lights that blinked like angry eyes. Each ship was 3 times bigger than anything humans had ever made. There were so many of them that they blocked out some of the stars. Kim Tae-ho had been a ship captain for 20 years, but he had never seen anything like this. Down on the moon base, Admiral Yoon Hae-jin was getting ready to talk to the aliens. She was an old woman with gray hair and hard eyes who had fought in many wars on Earth. But those wars were between humans fighting other humans. This was something completely different. Her hands shook just a little bit as she turned on the communication system. The alien face that appeared on the screen was terrible to look at. It had 4 red eyes and green scaly skin like a snake. Its teeth were sharp and yellow, and when it smiled, it looked like it wanted to eat someone. The alien was wearing fancy clothes with gold decorations that showed it was very important. Behind, the alien Kim Tae-ho could see other aliens working at strange computers. The alien leader spoke in perfect English, but his voice was cold and mean. He said his name was Commander Vex, and he came from the great Zorathian Empire. The Empire ruled over 300 different star systems and had been conquering planets for thousands of years. They had destroyed entire civilizations and made slaves out of billions of creatures across the galaxy. Commander Vex told Admiral Yoon that Earth now belonged to the Zorathian Empire, whether humans liked it or not. He said humans were a primitive and weak species that had no right to exist without permission from their betters. The aliens had been watching Earth for many years and had decided that humans might be useful as workers and slaves if they behaved properly. The alien commander gave Earth exactly 72 hours to surrender completely. All human weapons had to be given to the aliens. All human leaders had to bow down and accept Zorathian rule. Every human would have to work for the Empire for the rest of their lives. If humans refused to surrender, the aliens would destroy every city on Earth and kill every person they could find. To show they were serious, the aliens sent videos of other planets they had conquered. The videos showed beautiful worlds with tall cities and green forests. Then they showed the same worlds after the Zorathians had finished with them. There was nothing left but burned ground and empty cities. Billions of creatures had died because they tried to fight the Empire. Commander Vex laughed when he finished talking. He said humans were even weaker than most species the Empire had conquered. Earth only had 1 small warship, while the Zorathians had thousands. Human weapons were toys compared to Zorathian technology that could crack planets in half. The aliens had never lost a single battle in 3,000 years of conquest. On Earth, people watched the alien message on television, and many started to panic. In the big cities, crowds of people tried to leave, but there was nowhere to go. The aliens had surrounded the entire solar system, and their ships were faster than anything humans had built. Some people prayed to their gods, while others got angry and demanded that the government fight back somehow. The world leaders held emergency meetings, but nobody knew what to do. The President of America looked at reports that said the alien ships each had enough firepower to destroy entire countries. The Chinese premier read intelligence files that showed human technology was hundreds of years behind what the aliens possessed. Every expert agreed that fighting was impossible and surrender was the only choice. But in secret military bases around the world, other people were making different plans. Dr. Park Min-soo was working in a hidden laboratory under a mountain where he had spent 10 years building weapons that nobody was supposed to know about. The weapons used new kinds of science that most people thought was impossible. Dr. Park had been waiting for this day, and now it had finally come. On the spaceship, Defiance Captain Kim Tae-ho walked through the long hallways looking at his crew. There were only 300 people on the ship, but each one had trained for years to use technology that pushed the limits of what science could do. They had practiced fighting enemies that were bigger and stronger and had better weapons, but they had learned how to win anyway. Dr. Choi So-young was in the medical section getting ready to treat wounds from a battle that had not happened yet. She had medicines and equipment that could heal injuries that should have been impossible to survive. Her medical bay could bring people back from the edge of death using techniques that combined human knowledge with discoveries made in the deepest parts of space. As the 72-hour deadline got closer, both sides prepared for what everyone thought would be the shortest war in history. The Zorathians expected to win easily and were already making plans for how to divide up Earth between their different commanders. They had fought weak species before, and humans looked even weaker than most. Their weapons could destroy moons, and their shields had never been broken by any enemy. The alien fleet moved into attack positions around Earth like wolves surrounding a wounded deer. Each ship carried enough soldiers to conquer an entire continent and weapons that could boil oceans. The Zorathian commanders were already arguing about which of them would get the best pieces of the planet after the humans were defeated or killed. But the humans were not planning to surrender, and they were not planning to die. In research centers, hidden all over the solar system, scientists made final checks on technologies that existed only in their wildest theories. Captain Kim Tae-ho looked at his weapon controls and smiled for the first time in days. The aliens thought they knew what humans could do, but they were about to learn that humans had been hiding their real capabilities for a very long time. The countdown to humanity's deadline began ticking away, but Kim Tae-ho was not worried anymore. He had spent his whole life preparing for this moment, and he knew something the aliens did not know. Humans had never been good at surrendering, and they were not going to start now. The Zorathians thought they were hunting helpless prey, but they were about to discover they had walked into a trap that had been centuries in the making. The 72 hours passed like a bad dream that nobody could wake up from. All across Earth, people held their breath, waiting to see what would happen when the deadline came. In their homes, families hugged each other and wondered if they would live to see another day. The alien ships hung in space like dark clouds ready to bring death and destruction to the blue planet below. When the final hour arrived, Captain Kim Tae-ho sat in his command chair on the bridge of the Defiance. Around him, his crew worked at their stations with calm faces, even though they all knew they might die in the next few minutes. The captain looked at the communication screen and saw Commander Vex, waiting with his cruel smile and hungry eyes. Kim. Tae-ho pressed the button to send his message to the alien fleet. His voice was steady and clear when he spoke, even though he was about to say words that would shock the entire galaxy. He told Commander Vex that humans did not accept the Zorathian offer and would not surrender their planet or their freedom. Then he said something that made the alien commander's face turn dark with rage. He told the aliens to leave Earth's solar system immediately, or they would face consequences they could not imagine. The human captain spoke like he was giving orders to the massive alien fleet instead of begging for mercy. He sounded like he actually believed his one small ship could fight hundreds of giant alien warships and win. Commander Vex screamed with anger when he heard the human response. He had conquered 300 worlds, and no primitive species had ever dared to speak to him with such disrespect. The alien commander ordered his entire fleet to attack Earth immediately and show these foolish humans what happened when they defied the mighty Zorathian Empire. The alien ships moved forward in perfect formation like they had done thousands of times before. Their weapons began to glow with deadly energy that could melt mountains and boil seas. The Zorathian battle plan was simple and had never failed. They would destroy the human warship first, then blast every city on Earth until the survivors begged for mercy. But something strange happened when the alien fleet got closer to Earth. Instead of hiding behind the planet's defense stations or trying to run away, the single human ship began moving toward the center of the Zorathian formation. The Defiance accelerated faster than any ship the aliens had ever seen and performed turns that should have crushed the crew inside from the forces involved. Lieutenant Commander Lee J. Min watched his defense screens as energy beams from 50 different alien ships all fired at the Defiance at the same time. The beams were powerful enough to crack a moon in half, but when they hit the human ship, something impossible happened. Instead of burning through the hull, the alien weapons seemed to bend around the Defiance like water flowing around a rock. The human ship's shields worked in ways that violated everything the Zorathians thought they knew about science and technology. The more energy the aliens poured into their attacks, the stronger the human defenses seemed to become. It was like the Defiance was feeding on the alien weapons and growing more powerful with each hit it took. Commander Vex stared at his tactical displays in shock as his most powerful weapons failed to even scratch the human ship. His science officers were shouting confused reports about energy readings that made no sense. The humans were using technology that seemed to ignore the basic laws of physics that governed how the universe was supposed to work. Then the Defiance fired back and everything changed forever. The human weapons only fired once, but the results were catastrophic for the alien fleet. Instead of normal energy beams or missiles, the human ship unleashed something that existed at the very edge of what science could achieve. 20 Zorathian ships simply ceased to exist, leaving not even debris behind. Dr. Kang Yuna monitored the weapon systems from the ship's science laboratory, watching displays that showed impossible amounts of energy being channeled through systems that should not have been able to contain such forces. The weapons drew their power from the fabric of space itself, creating reactions that turned matter directly into pure energy in ways that redefined what was possible. The alien commander found himself facing something that had never happened in 3,000 years of Zorathian conquest. His mighty fleet was being destroyed by a single enemy ship using technology that his best scientists could not understand or explain. Ships that had conquered entire star systems were being reduced to atomic particles by weapons that seemed to operate outside the known laws of reality. More human weapons fired and more alien ships died in flashes of light that could be seen from Earth's surface. The Zorathian fleet tried to retreat, but found that the human ship was faster than anything they had ever encountered. The Defiance moved through space like it was dancing, while alien vessels exploded all around it in brilliant displays of destructive force. On Earth, billions of people watched in amazement as their impossible ship fought the alien invaders. The vessel moved with grace and power that seemed almost magical as it carved through the enemy formation, leaving destruction in its wake. What should have been humanity's darkest hour was becoming something else entirely, a demonstration of hidden power that shocked both species. The Zorathian fleet began to break apart as individual ships tried to escape rather than continue the hopeless battle. Captains who had never known defeat found themselves running from an enemy they could not hurt, while that same enemy destroyed their comrades with casual ease. The predators had become prey in a reversal that would be remembered across the galaxy for centuries to come. Commander Vex realized that everything his empire believed about humans was completely wrong. These were not primitive creatures who could be easily conquered, but a species that had deliberately hidden their true capabilities until the moment of greatest danger. The aliens had walked into a trap that had been prepared specifically for overconfident invaders like themselves. As more Zorathian ships fell to the human assault, panic spread through the alien ranks. Their communication channels filled with desperate calls for help and increasingly frantic questions about how this impossible situation had come to pass. The empire that had never known defeat was experiencing something beyond their understanding, the complete collapse of everything they thought they knew about warfare and power. Captain Kim Tae-ho smiled as he watched the alien fleet scatter in. Confusion and terror. The first phase of humanity's plan was working perfectly, and the Zorathians were about to discover that their troubles had only just begun. Commander Song Ji-hai watched her tactical displays as the Zorathian fleet continued to fall apart around them. The alien ships that had seemed so terrifying just hours before were now scattered across space like leaves blown by a strong wind. Many were trying to escape, while others spun out of control with their engines damaged by weapons they could not understand. The human ship Defiance moved through the battle zone with deadly precision, striking targets that tried to reform their attack formations. Each shot from the human weapons created brief stars in space as alien vessels were converted from matter into pure energy. The ship's hull glowed with power discharges that should have torn it apart, but instead seemed to make it even stronger. Captain Kim Tae-ho opened communication channels to broadcast a message across all frequencies that the remaining alien ships could receive. His voice was calm and steady as he spoke to enemies who had intended to destroy his entire species just a few hours earlier. He offered them terms that no Zorathian commander had ever heard from a conquered people. He told the aliens they could surrender immediately and face judgment for their crimes against countless innocent species across the galaxy. Or they could continue fighting and face complete annihilation from forces they clearly could not match or comprehend. The choice was theirs, but they had exactly 10 minutes to decide before the human fleet would resume its attack. The word fleet made Commander Vex and his surviving officers look at their sensors in confusion and growing horror. They had been focused on the single human ship that was destroying their forces, but now they realized that other signals were appearing throughout the solar system. What they had thought was one vessel was actually just the beginning of Earth's real military power. Hidden installations throughout human space began to reveal themselves as the need for secrecy ended. Asteroid mining stations dropped their disguises to show weapon systems that dwarfed anything on traditional warships. Research facilities on distant moons activated defense networks that had been secretly built over many decades. The entire solar system had been transformed into a massive trap. Dr. Lim Kyung-ho coordinated the system-wide defense network from his command center deep under the surface of Mars. His fingers moved across controls that managed enough firepower to destroy entire fleets, while his screens showed the positions of hundreds of hidden weapons platforms. Every mining operation and scientific outpost had been secretly preparing for this exact moment. The revelation hit the Zorathian survivors like a physical blow that left them reeling in shock and disbelief. They were not facing a single advanced ship with lucky technology, but an entire civilization that had secretly developed capabilities far beyond anything the Empire possessed. The humans had deliberately appeared primitive and weak to lure their enemies into a carefully prepared ambush. Zorathian intelligence reports had claimed that Earth barely had any space-based weapons, and certainly nothing that could threaten a real military force. But those reports had been based on information that the humans had wanted them to see. Every scan of human facilities had been carefully managed to hide the true extent of their defensive preparations. As more hidden weapons came online, the mathematical reality of the situation became clear to every alien commander who was still alive to understand it. The Zorathians were outnumbered, outgunned, and completely outmatched by an enemy that operated with technology they could not counter. Their 3,000-year-old empire was being humbled by a species they had intended to enslave. The alien communication channels filled with desperate calls as ship captains realized their situation was hopeless. Some begged for mercy, while others demanded reinforcements that everyone knew would never arrive in time. A few tried to maintain their dignity by ordering futile attacks, but their crews refused to follow suicidal commands from officers who had led them into this disaster. Commander Vex found himself facing a choice that no Zorathian leader had ever been forced to make in the history of their empire. He could order his remaining ships to continue a battle they could not win and watch them all die for nothing. Or he could surrender to creatures his people had considered barely intelligent animals and face the shame of being the first Zorathian commander to lose a war. The human weapons demonstrated their restraint by targeting ship engines and weapons systems instead of simply destroying everything in sight. The aliens found themselves being systematically disabled and captured rather than killed outright. This mercy was somehow more humiliating than death would have been, because it showed that the humans were so confident in their victory that they did not even consider the aliens a real threat anymore. Captain Kim Tae-ho's ship moved through the battlefield, marking targets for the hidden weapon systems while avoiding the desperate return fire from alien vessels that refused to accept defeat. The Defiance seemed to dance between enemy shots while its own weapons picked off Zorathian ships with casual precision that showed just how outmatched the invaders really were. The tide of battle had turned so completely that human forces began taking prisoners on a massive scale. Boarding parties equipped with the same impossible technology that protected the Defiance moved through alien ships, disabling their systems and securing their crews. The Zorathians found their own vessels turned against them as humans took control of their most advanced systems. Dr. Park Min-soo monitored the boarding operations from his engineering station, watching as human technology interfaced with alien computers in ways that should not have been possible. The humans seemed to understand Zorathian systems better than the aliens themselves did, identifying weaknesses and backdoors that the original designers had never known existed. As the scope of their defeat became clear, something unprecedented happened within the alien fleet. Ships that had fought together for decades began surrendering independently as their crews recognized the complete futility of continued resistance. The Zorathian command structure started to collapse as individual captains abandoned their military oaths in favor of simple survival. The empire that had ruled through fear and superior technology found both of those advantages turned against them. Subject species across hundreds of worlds would soon learn that the invincible Zorathians had been defeated by a single human fleet. The psychological impact of this knowledge would shake the foundations of galactic civilization and inspire rebellions that had been impossible to imagine just hours before. Commander Vex stared at his tactical display showing the scattered remains of his once mighty fleet. In a few short hours, everything he had believed about Zorathian superiority and human weakness had been proven completely wrong. Now he faced a future where his empire's enemies would know that the great military machine could be beaten by enemies with better technology and stronger will to fight for their freedom. The remaining Zorathian ships found themselves trapped in a cage of human-controlled space with nowhere to run and no hope of escape. Their faster-than-light engines had been disabled by technologies they could not understand, leaving them stranded in the solar system like fish caught in a net. Captain Kim Tae-ho's ship held position at the center of the formation with its weapons trained on vessels that had once seemed invincible. The human captain's voice echoed across all communication frequencies as he addressed the defeated alien fleet. His words carried the weight of human history and all the struggles his species had endured to reach this moment of absolute victory. He spoke of the countless civilizations the Zorathians had destroyed and the billions of innocent beings they had enslaved or killed across their empire. Admiral Yoon Hae-jin took control of the negotiations from her command center on Luna Base. She had studied reports of Zorathian atrocities for months while preparing for this confrontation, and her voice was cold as winter when she listed their crimes. The aliens had turned entire star systems into graveyards and reduced proud civilizations to scattered refugees hiding in the dark between the stars. She offered the surviving Zorathians a choice their empire had never given to its victims. They could surrender unconditionally and face trial for their crimes against galactic civilization, or they could continue to resist and face immediate execution as enemies of all free peoples throughout the galaxy. The decision was theirs, but they had exactly 1 hour to choose their fate. Commander Vex listened to the human demands with growing despair as he realized the true scope of his situation. His proud empire had been built on the principle that might made right, and the strong had the natural right to rule over the weak. But now his people were the weak ones, facing judgment from enemies who possessed superior strength and technology. The alien commander's response came slowly as his pride warred with the mathematical certainty of complete defeat. Around him on the bridge, his officers stared at displays showing impossible human technologies in action. Their ship's computers could not even properly analyze the energy signatures they detected from the human weapons, much less develop countermeasures against them. But humanity's victory went far deeper than simple military superiority over an enemy fleet. As the aliens studied their captors, they began to understand that humans had developed sciences and technologies that operated on principles completely unknown to galactic civilization. The mysterious weapons drew power from quantum fluctuations in the fabric of space itself, creating effects that seemed to violate several fundamental laws of physics. Lieutenant Commander Basu Jin led the boarding teams that began securing alien vessels throughout the trapped fleet. The human soldiers moved with equipment that made them effectively invulnerable to conventional weapons, while their armor incorporated the same impossible technologies that protected the Defiance. Each boarding party carried devices that could disable alien systems through methods that seemed like pure magic. The Zorathian prisoners found themselves facing interrogation techniques that revealed the true scope of human technological advancement. Dr. Park Yun-young directed teams of specialists who could extract information directly from alien computer systems using methods that bypassed every security measure the Empire had developed over thousands of years of military experience. The humans seemed to understand Zorathian technology better than its original creators did. They identified design flaws and security vulnerabilities that had never been discovered by the aliens themselves. Every system the Empire considered unbreakable fell to human analysis within minutes of examination, revealing just how far behind the supposedly advanced aliens really were. As the scope of human capabilities became clear, something unprecedented began happening within the defeated alien fleet. Ships that had served together in the same battle formations for decades started surrendering independently as their crews recognized the complete futility of continued resistance. The Zorathian military hierarchy began to collapse as individual commanders made separate peace with their captors. The Empire's greatest strength suddenly became its most dangerous weakness as news of the defeat began spreading through their vast communication networks. The Zorathians had built their power on fear and the respect that came from never losing a battle in 3,000 years of conquest. But now that fear was turning against them as subject worlds began to see new possibilities for their own freedom. Reports flooded in from across Zorathian space as species that had been enslaved for centuries began rising up against their oppressors. The news that humans had defeated the invincible Empire spread faster than the aliens could suppress it, inspiring rebellions on dozens of worlds simultaneously. The psychological impact was devastating to Zorathian control as their subjects realized their masters could be beaten. Captain Kim Tae-ho received updated intelligence reports showing the Empire beginning to fragment from within as local commanders lost control of the populations they had ruled through terror. Entire star systems were declaring independence while Zorathian military forces found themselves fighting desperate holding actions against enemies they had never taken seriously before. The most shocking revelation came when human intelligence networks detected communication traffic from civilizations that had remained completely hidden during the centuries of Zorathian dominance. These secret societies had developed technologies focused on concealment and survival rather than conquest, and they were finally emerging to offer assistance to the species that had accomplished what they had never dared attempt. Commander Vex realized that his defeat was just the beginning of a cascade of disasters that would destroy everything his empire had built. The subject worlds were not simply rebelling, they were receiving assistance from hidden powers that possessed technologies the Zorathians had never suspected existed. His people's 3,000-year reign was ending not in glorious battle, but in complete political and military collapse. The final blow came when intercepted communications revealed that the Zorathian homeworlds were considering surrendering rather than face the systematic destruction of their civilization. the Empire's Senate was meeting in emergency session to discuss terms of unconditional surrender while their military leaders argued over who would take responsibility for the greatest defeat in galactic history. Dr. Han Mi-kyung coordinated translation efforts as messages arrived from dozens of species offering alliance with humanity against their former oppressors. The hidden civilizations were sharing intelligence about Zorathian weaknesses and providing detailed information about the Empire's military capabilities to assist in the liberation of enslaved worlds across the galaxy. As reports continued to arrive showing the complete collapse of Zorathian authority, Captain Kim Tae-ho realized that humanity's victory had accomplished something far greater than simple self-defense. They had triggered a galactic revolution that would reshape the balance of power among the stars and free billions of beings from centuries of oppression and slavery. The reckoning had begun, and there would be no mercy for an empire that had shown none to its countless victims across the galaxy. The collapse of the Zorathian Empire happened faster than anyone had thought possible. Within just 2 weeks of the battle Earth, reports were flooding in from across the galaxy, showing rebellions on hundreds of worlds simultaneously. The news of humanity's impossible victory had spread through every communication network in known space, inspiring enslaved populations to rise up against their oppressors with new hope for freedom. Commander Ryu Dong-woo monitored the intelligence reports from his station aboard the Defiance as updates arrived from across Zorathian space. Entire star systems were declaring independence from the Empire, while local military commanders found themselves unable to maintain control over populations that no longer feared their supposedly invincible masters. The psychological impact of seeing humans defeat the Empire had shattered 3,000 years of carefully maintained terror. But the most shocking development came when ships began arriving at Earth from civilizations that had remained completely hidden during centuries of Zorathian rule. These vessels appeared without warning, using stealth technologies that made them invisible to both human and alien sensors until they chose to reveal themselves. Their crews brought greetings from entire galactic confederations that had developed in secret. Dr. Han Mi-kyung led the teams working around the clock to translate communications from species whose existence had been unknown to both humans and Zorathians. These hidden civilizations had spent millennia developing technologies focused on concealment and survival rather than conquest. They had watched the Empire grow and spread while remaining safely hidden in the dark spaces between the stars. The secret societies emerged now to offer alliance with the one species that had accomplished what they had never dared attempt themselves. They brought with them knowledge of the galaxy's true political structure, showing that the Zorathian Empire had controlled less than half of inhabited space. Vast regions had remained free and independent, hidden behind veils of advanced technology that made their worlds undetectable to Imperial scouts. Captain Kim Tae-ho found himself meeting with ambassadors from dozens of species he had never known existed. Each delegation brought offers of assistance in the ongoing liberation of former Zorathian territories, along with intelligence about Imperial weaknesses that had been gathered over centuries of careful observation. The hidden civilizations had been waiting for exactly this moment when someone would finally break the Empire's power. The most important revelation came from a species called the Cathani, who had been watching Earth for over a century. They had seen humanity's rapid technological development and recognized the potential for humans to become the catalyst that would finally free the galaxy from Zorathian tyranny. Some of the technologies that made human victory possible had actually been inspired by carefully planted hints from these secret observers. But the hidden allies brought warnings as well as assistance. The Zorathian Empire was just one of several tyrannical powers that ruled different sections of the galaxy through fear and superior technology. The collapse of Zorathian control would create a power vacuum that other aggressive civilizations would try to fill unless someone was prepared to prevent them from establishing new forms of oppression. Dr. Choi So-young worked with alien medical experts to develop treatments for species that had suffered under Zorathian rule for generations. Many enslaved populations had been deliberately weakened by their masters through biological weapons and genetic manipulation designed to make resistance impossible. The liberation of these peoples would require not just military victory, but extensive medical intervention to restore their natural capabilities. The response from Earth's leadership surprised many of the hidden civilizations who had expected humans to simply replace the Zorathians as the galaxy's new rulers. Instead, humanity proposed something that had never been attempted on such a scale before. They offered to help establish a new form of galactic organization based on voluntary cooperation between equals rather than domination by the strongest. Military power. Admiral Yoon Hai-jin presented the proposal to representatives from over 50 different species gathered at a secret meeting in neutral space. She outlined humanity's vision of a galactic confederation where each member civilization would maintain complete independence while cooperating on matters of mutual interest like trade defense and scientific research. No single species would have the power to dominate others regardless of their technological or military advantages. The proposal sent shockwaves through the assembled delegates as they grappled with concepts that challenged every assumption about how galactic politics had to work. Most civilizations had only known systems where the strong ruled the weak, and the idea that advanced species would voluntarily limit their own power to protect weaker ones seemed almost impossible to believe. But humanity backed up their words with actions that proved their sincerity. Human ships began appearing throughout former Zorathian space, not to conquer territory for themselves, but to assist in the liberation of enslaved worlds. The advanced technologies that had made victory possible were shared freely with any species that pledged to never again engage in slavery or conquest of their neighbors. The generosity was so unprecedented that many civilizations initially suspected some kind of deception or trap. They could not understand why a species with such overwhelming military superiority would give away their advantages instead of using them to build their own empire. The concept of using power to protect rather than dominate was foreign to most galactic civilizations. Commander Vex and the other captured Zorathian leaders watched from their prison cells as reports arrived showing the complete dissolution of everything they had built. Their former subjects were not just declaring independence, but were actively hunting down Zorathian administrators and military personnel across hundreds of worlds. The price of 3,000 years of oppression was finally being collected with interest. Some of the liberated species showed mercy to their former oppressors, but others sought brutal revenge for centuries of suffering. Human forces found themselves in the strange position of protecting Zorathian refugees from the very populations the Empire had enslaved. Captain Kim Tae-ho issued orders that no prisoner should be harmed regardless of their crimes because justice had to be better than revenge. The most dramatic moment came when the Zorathian homeworlds formally dissolved the Empire and requested protection from the human fleet. The alien Senate voted unanimously to surrender all claims to their former territories and to accept whatever punishment humanity deemed appropriate for their crimes against galactic civilization. The species that had once demanded Earth's surrender was now begging for mercy from the very people they had threatened to enslave. But even as victory celebrations began on liberated worlds throughout the galaxy, Captain Kim Tae-ho knew that the real work was just beginning. Defeating the Zorathian Empire had been the easy part compared to what came next. Building a new galactic civilization based on cooperation and mutual respect would require even greater strength than winning battles against enemies who refused to recognize the rights of others. The price of Zorathian arrogance had been the complete destruction of their empire and the freedom of billions of enslaved beings across the galaxy. But the price of human victory would be the responsibility to help build something better in its place and to ensure that no species would ever again suffer under the kind of tyranny the Zorathians had represented. 5 years had passed since the battle that changed everything, and Captain Kim Tae-ho now stood on the observation deck of Freedom Station, humanity's first permanent base outside the solar system. The massive structure orbited what had once been the capital world of the Zorathian Empire serving as headquarters for the Galactic Cooperation Council that had risen from the ashes of the old tyranny. Through the transparent windows, he could see ships from dozens of different species coming and going in peaceful trade. The transformation had exceeded even the most optimistic predictions that human planners had dared to make. The technologies that humanity shared freely with liberated worlds had revolutionized life across the galaxy, providing clean, unlimited energy, advanced medical treatments, and defensive systems to civilizations that had never known such abundance. Former slave worlds had become thriving centers of culture and scientific research. Admiral Yoon Hai-jin now served as Earth's chief representative to the Cooperation Council, reviewing reports from across human space with satisfaction mixed with constant vigilance. Humanity's rapid expansion had brought them into contact with threats far more dangerous than anything the Zorathians had ever represented. Ancient powers that had slept for millennia were awakening to challenge the new galactic order that humans had helped create. The former Zorathian worlds had proven surprisingly adaptable to their new circumstances, embracing freedom with an enthusiasm that amazed their liberators. Many former slaves had joined human crews aboard the growing fleet of Earth vessels, contributing their knowledge of galactic politics and alien psychology to help humanity navigate the complex relationships between hundreds of different species scattered across the stars. Dr. Choi So-young worked in laboratories that combined human innovation with knowledge from dozens of different alien civilizations, pushing the boundaries of medical science in directions that no single species could have achieved alone. The collaborative research had eliminated diseases that had plagued various species for thousands of years, while developing new treatments that could extend lifespans and improve quality of life throughout the galaxy. But the greatest change was not technological but philosophical, as the radical concept that different species could cooperate as equals began to take root in civilizations that had known only hierarchies of dominance for millennia. Trade agreements replaced tribute systems, cultural exchanges flourished where propaganda had once been used to maintain control, and scientific collaboration accelerated progress across all fields of knowledge. The hidden civilizations that had emerged after the Empire's collapse continued to share technologies and perspectives that enriched the growing galactic community. Some possessed sciences focused on consciousness and mental enhancement that could help species overcome psychological barriers to cooperation. Others had perfected biotechnology that could restore dead worlds to life, while a few had knowledge of dimensional physics that opened entirely new frontiers. Yet serious challenges remained that tested humanity's commitment to the principles they had fought to establish. Pirates and raiders formed from the remnants of the old imperial military refused to accept the new order and required constant vigilance from the expanding human fleet. Ancient alien artifacts sometimes activated, revealing technologies that predated current civilization and posed threats that demanded all of humanity's ingenuity to counter safely. Commander Ryu Dongwu led patrols through sectors where former Zorathian enforcers had established themselves as warlords over populations too weak to resist their depredations. These criminals had to be hunted down and defeated without becoming the same kind of oppressors humanity had originally fought against. Every victory had to demonstrate that power could be used responsibly to protect rather than exploit the innocent. The most difficult challenge came from species that had been so thoroughly broken by centuries of slavery that they could not adapt to freedom. Generations of oppression had convinced them that they needed masters to tell them what to do and how to live. Human psychologists and social workers struggled to help these populations rediscover their capacity for independence and self-determination. Dr. Park Min-soo continued developing new technologies and research stations scattered throughout human space, but now his work focused on defensive rather than offensive capabilities. The weapons that had won the war against the Zorathians were being converted into tools for construction and exploration, while new defensive systems were created to protect the growing network of free worlds from those who would restore the old. tyrannies. Reports arrived regularly of attempts by other galactic powers to fill the vacuum left by the Zorathian collapse. Some tried to use military force, while others relied on economic manipulation or cultural subversion to bring former imperial territories under their control. Each threat required a different response, but all demanded that humanity remain vigilant against those who saw freedom as an obstacle to their own ambitions. The story that had begun with humanity's desperate defense of Earth against impossible odds had evolved into something unprecedented in recorded galactic history. A single species had not only survived attempted annihilation, but had used their victory to liberate hundreds of others, creating a new form of civilization based on voluntary cooperation rather than imposed dominance. Captain Kim Tae-ho received daily reports from human ships operating throughout the galaxy as they assisted in the establishment of new governments, protected trade routes, and provided humanitarian aid to populations still recovering from centuries of oppression. The fleet that had started with one ship now numbered in the thousands, with vessels designed for exploration, research, medical assistance, and peaceful defense of innocent populations. The former Zorathians who had once demanded Earth's surrender now worked alongside their former intended victims, contributing their knowledge and resources to the growing galactic community. Many had embraced the human philosophy of cooperation so completely that they served as advocates for species that had suffered under their former empire, helping to negotiate peaceful solutions to conflicts that might otherwise have led to devastating wars. As Captain Kim Tae-ho looked out at the stars, he reflected on the endless consequences of that first impossible battle when one human ship had faced an entire alien fleet. Humanity had gained not just survival, but a purpose that would guide them for centuries to come. They had become the guardians of freedom and cooperation in a galaxy that was slowly learning that strength could be used to protect rather than dominate. The future stretched ahead filled with challenges that would test human ideals against the vastness of space itself and the ambitions of those who preferred the old ways of conquest and oppression. But the precedent had been established and could never be undone. When faced with impossible odds, humanity had found a way to win, and they had used that victory to make the galaxy a better place for everyone who called it home. The consequences of that choice would echo through the stars for generations to come, as more species learned that freedom was worth fighting for and that cooperation could achieve what conquest never could. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly what humanity had intended when they first refused to surrender to forces that seemed impossibly strong but proved to be surprisingly fragile when confronted by those who refused to accept defeat.